All right, welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. My name is Elsa. I'm the host of today, and we have a very wonderful guest, Crystal Morris from One Caring Adult. Before we get into this very interesting topic, you, Crystal, from what I read about you, are a wealth of knowledge. You are a founder and CEO of One Caring Adult Inc. You are a cultural and climate architect who educates school districts, departments such as police, and also private organizations on strategies, especially to transform trauma to resilience by fostering meaningful relationships and culturally responsive spaces, among many, many things I'm sure that you'll tell us. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as One Caring Adult, and how you came about to founding this organization.
Sure, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So my background is I'm an educator. I taught middle and high school. I've done a lot of community capacity building, professional development. So education is at the core of what I do. On top of that, I went to school and I became a therapist, right? My mental health experience working with youth and their families. So I had the opportunity to bridge the gap between the two. How do I fuse my love for education with my commitment to health in all of its facets, not just physical health, but emotional health and well-being. And that's the purpose of One Caring Adult. I have a very singular vision for my business. It is to see a dismantled school to prison pipeline. I'm selfish in that regard. That's all I want my work to do. But I can't do that by just going in and working with teachers and principals. I have to look at the community because the village does need to raise the child. So I partner with organizations to transform their culture and their climate. So that's why it's this culture and climate architect. But I do that in order to relieve the stress and strain that adults face, who are parents that go home and they lack the ability to sit and read a book to their children, to engage in homework activities, to do parent-teacher meetings, to have that meaningful satisfaction and work-life balance. I work to create that for them within their organization so that they can be the effective parents they're capable of being, so that their children are able to attain literacy outcomes that schools so desperately want to see, so that they can in turn get meaningful jobs and be a positive impact in society. So all of that for that one goal, to dismantle the school to prison pipeline that disproportionately affects people of color, predominantly Black people in this country.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely. That's what you need. I gave you a whole mouthful.
No, that's a very wonderful description, because it's so much more than, what people read about. So to hear straight from, the founder herself, it's really incredible. And when you talked about parents, I know we talked about it a little bit before we started recording this. I think it affects a lot more minority groups, and especially Black communities, because we can't afford to even send our children to daycare, let alone even afford one, because a lot of Black communities, marginalized communities in general, are they try to make ends meet. So to create that space for them to even know that space exists is already like comforting to know that someone else is doing it. So what got you into starting it in the first place? What was the mission, and what's the name? What's the idea behind the naming of One Caring Adult?
All right. So I was a part of an organization that I love the work that I do, or I did. It's directly in line with my core values. I did a lot of work on educating communities on trauma and trauma-informed care, which is still what I do with my business now. But while in that space, I have never in my entire life experienced the degree of corporate trauma that I had in that environment. And research shows 53% of individuals are leaving their jobs right now because of that culture of trauma and harm that is intentionally or unintentionally caused by leaders who don't lead effectively. So I'm a product of the Great Resignation. One Caring Adult was birthed in the middle of this crazy pandemic that we find ourselves. But again, the reason for it is to be that one caring adult that has the ability to partner with another caring adult and another one to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. So specifically why I chose that name was I did a presentation one, I think maybe a couple of years ago, and I was doing the research for it, and I came up across this peer-reviewed article that said 55% of elementary school children don't have one. Their perception was that they don't have one caring or supportive adult. 56 of secondary school children, for those here in the States, that's middle and high school, 56% of them said that they didn't have that caring and supportive adult. But everything shows that those positive childhood experiences that are needed to mitigate negative childhood experience, a lot of it is centered in connection and relationship with caring and supportive adults.
Yeah.
So I just want to create one. If I can create one, that one can create another one, because leaders beget leaders, right? And that's why I settled on the name One Caring Adult.
That is really sentimental, and I think you're right. It takes one person to make that one change, and it's a ripple effect, like you said. And then even me hearing about this, knowing that support like this exists, is just really, really nice. It's already relieving in the mind to know that there's someone else that cares, and I think that's the whole point of it. So it really is wonderful. And I think when you talked about corporate trauma, I also have been. I think the way you coined it is really, really essential, and it's really like it hits the nail on the head, just because we get corporate trauma in various forms, especially Black communities or Black minorities. And, it's either it could be in a form of microaggression, or it could be in a form of lack of access to services, even mental health services. Yes, they're coming up with a lot of services, especially like after 2020, within the pandemic context as well. They're trying to come up with these services, but I find them to be more text oriented than actually putting that thought process and that saying, we care about you, therefore that's why we have these services. But instead, it's just a plain text, black and white. And in some cases, it's more so they do it for the policy purpose to say, yes, we fit our goals. And
regulation says you have to have the policy, right? So here's your policy, check off.
Yeah, exactly. It's a checkbox, and it's often problematic. For me, I think, yes, it's one step, but it's like one small step that needs a lot more conversations, a lot more push forward, especially from the higher ups that are predominantly, white folks. And you're like, how am I going to make you understand the cultural disparities, the, racial and ethnic disparities that exist, that exists within this corporate system? And it happens everywhere. It's not even, small organizations or even private organizations. I see it everywhere, even international organizations. I've worked with a few before. So, and I think you see the policy and it's almost similar. It's almost parallel that you're like, yeah, I saw it there. I saw it here. Is everyone really copying off of one another? So I always found it interesting. And so when you said corporate trauma, I think that really, it just stuck with me. That is literally what it is. It is that trauma, and it is that trauma that we don't even have the privilege to feel out, or to say, yes, I'm experiencing it, but I don't have the time to feel my experience, or even figure out what it is I'm trying to fix for myself, just because, mental health for Black people, it's like a privilege that we don't get, a privilege that we don't often have. So, even reading about One Caring Adult, it just takes one person. And I always find that if I can find one person within an organization that cares, it's already like a relieving to know that there's someone else out there besides the policy or besides that checkbox. So, which brings us to
a whole bunch of beautiful nuggets that I want to amplify. I don't want to have it missed. I think one of the reasons corporate trauma might have resonated with you could be the fact that it's never seen as trauma. So if we hear of a person that was a victim of sexual abuse or some kind of egregious act, even if it's a car accident, if we hear those things that we typically associate with trauma, we have a visceral response to it that instantly causes us to want to do something to fix. But when it comes to the workplace, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You are getting paid to do a job. You are not getting paid to want to feel like you belong, to have your needs met, to be validated, to be affirmed, to be appreciated. You're not getting paid for any of that.
Yeah.
And if your mindset to doing work is, well, I didn't have it easy and I fought to get to where I am, so why should I make it easy for the next person? if someone tries to advocate for themselves and to hold agency of their experience, they will instantly be ridiculed. They will instantly be seen as aggressive, not a team player. Assertiveness is a privilege that many people don't have, especially if you wear dark skin. It is
Mhm.
never going to be seen as you advocating. It's always going to be seen as aggressive or you being ungrateful for the privilege to be, of all the people, I chose you and this is how you retain me.
Yeah.
So a lot of people always ask me, well, Crystal, why don't people speak up for themselves in organizations if they feel this way? Why didn't you do it when you were in your organization?
Mhm.
They don't know me if they ask that question because Lord knows I don't know how to not speak up. um, but I also will acknowledge the fact that I have such a cushion and a covering from my husband that it allows me the power to do so. And if you don't have that, you won't be able. So you said privilege 3 or 4 times, and that is what all of this is.
Mhm.
Accessing mental health, not
Mhm.
just the checkbox procedures that exist, but truly accessing it and actualizing it. That
Mhm.
is oftentimes a privilege for people in predominantly or historically marginalized communities because we've never been seen as capable of experiencing anything but hustling and hard work. We're seen as these superhuman individuals that don't need anything in terms of support or maintenance because we can do it. And so many of us internalize that. That's why we wear capes and we wear masks. It's a privilege. And now we need to normalize access to it and remove the stigmas, not just from other people outside of the community, but for us inside of the community that's internalized this fallacy that strength is silently enduring. That's not strength.
Yeah. I mean, you said
Told you my
so
dog was
many.
going to make an appearance at some point. And here
Hi. Oh God. I mean, honestly, it's as if you're like in my head when we're discussing this. Is because we really, really think it is like access, and I think this is exactly what brings us to the topic of that we're discussing today is on the race, ethnicity, and the use of mental health services. I mean, I always find even the concepts really like interesting just because they are interchangeable, but a lot of the times they're seen as this like homogenous, homogenous entities, and that really is not true. And usually, when they come more to highlight to someone's head, when someone is asking the question of where are you from and what's your ethnic background, which are two different questions, by the way. And I think they assume, I mean, when they ask the where you're from, I assume you mean where I live, or but it makes us create those assumptions. And when they're supposed to be asking really like the question of what's your ethnic background, if that's the question that they're trying to answer. And I think I don't even have in terms of like access to mental health, I think the reason why we're bringing this as topic is because there's always these barriers that exist for mental health access, mental health services. And there's the access point of view, and there's also this race and ethnic barriers that exist within communities that would like to have access to that. So I think, do you think someone of an ethnic minority, I guess, or an ethnic background is less likely I guess I'm trying to bring it into two different, two different parallels. One is the lack of access itself for Black communities in general is a lot higher than for their white counterparts because it could be lack of knowledge, or it could be the resistance to wanting to gain this access. Like you said, it's a privilege for us to even know that such thing exists. So what's your take on the question of, I guess, are people of certain minority backgrounds, certain ethnic backgrounds less likely, or they're like less willingly to even go to this to mental health services, even if the access exists, due to it could be certain barriers that exist within the culture that they belong to.
Mhm. So I will start by saying we parent the way we've been parented. We love the way we've been loved, right? For the most part. There's always exceptions to the rule, but we can only do what we know. If that deposit was never invested in us, then how can we make that withdrawal? We can't ask people to deliver on something we've never equipped them with the ability.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'll look at it the first thing that popped in my mind was I had a conversation with my oldest yesterday. She's 11, and she overheard me talking to a colleague about a project that I'm working on, and it's creating equitable solutions. And she thought I was mispronouncing the word for equality. She's like, she teases me all the time. You Jamaican people always talk so weird. It's equality, mom, not equity. I'm like, okay, so let's understand the difference. And I gave her a scenario where she saw equality cause if you have something to start with, you'll get more. If you didn't have anything, you're barely breaking even. You don't get your needs met with equality. But equity, because it's outcome driven, you get your needs met.
Right.
So looking at mental health from that equitable perspective, look at it because I was talking about my daughter, I look at it from that space of children. When you have a child that is coming from an affluent background, not even having to be an affluent background, because research shows us that white children have access to resources that black scholars never have access to. So you go into a school, and as a white student, your guidance counselor asks questions, preps you for support, puts you on a pathway to success by enlisting you in IB programs or AP programs. And then you have a black student that before they walk into the room, there's an assumption that is made because their name is not a traditional name. It is one that is perceived to be made up. And as a result, because there is no credence to the origins of those names, they don't need to be pronounced. They don't need to be affirmed. They don't need to be validated. If students are going into schools with that as their story, then what would cause them to think that they should access? And then you go home, and because the stress level, down dog, because the stress level is not the same at home, you get affirmed, you get your needs met, you get supported, you get those extracurricular activities. But in the other household, you get the talk. If you see a cop, show respect, don't look them in the eye. Your only job is to make it home. You also get the talk of we can't pay for this month, so we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So if I'm looking at these two children, what kind of adults will they grow into? If they look in their environments, if you're seeing grocery stores and parks and monuments and museums, and the other one you're seeing the payday advance and the strip club and the liquor store, and that's all you're seeing. If you're buying your groceries from the convenience store, what path are we putting those children down to grow into adults? Which one is going to be more likely to reach out for support? The one that has seen support model their entire life, or the one that has been empowered to fix it all in silence? You can't break, you don't have the luxury to break, because if you break, then everything is done. So when you think of this issue of accessibility when it comes to mental health, we have to look at the system in which individuals are living. And if the system is not conducive to it, then we can't fix the issues. It's not, which is why you talked about the transactional nature of organizations when they put in these policies and they rubber stamp these best practices, but it's literally there to check the boxes. Because nothing is shifting in the organization's culture that's going to impact the climate that benefits the individual.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I didn't even think of the systemic barriers. I think that exist even from the early childhood. And I think that really answers to a lot of the reasons why people don't even gain these, the Black communities don't even go to these accesses, because exactly like you said, Crystal, at home, we're taught, respect the cops, anyone that comes in your way, be respectful, even if you're at fault, you don't know the kind of responses or reactions you're going to get. And then on top of that, they're going to the school. And I mean, even from my personal experience, I remember there's in high school settings, there's these academic classes or like these gifted classes. And you see the classes that is offered to the white folks first. And even though that Black person could be like the most gifted person, they have to fight for it. So they have to learn how to vouch for themselves at such a young age to say, I'm going to get it. Unless there's like that one caring adult that kind of tailors them. But to how many kids and how many Black people are neglected of these amazing resources? And like you said, white families are going to give that support support to their child, because it's already there, it's readily available. And so that child's going to learn the support system, not only at home, but also at school. So as a parent, as a Black parent, you can only do, you give them that survivalist mentality, that resilience that they need to build at such a young age. And as crucial as it is, as much as I support that, yes, of course, you don't know what kind of environment that you're bringing yourself into. So as a parent, I have to protect you. However, I'm also indirectly, in a way, trying to protect your mental health, because you have to be resilient in these situations, because I may not be there when you're faced with those things. So, which brings us to, of course, you're not going to be aware of mental health services that exist for your, as a Black person in the future, going into, work settings. And if you see it, you go, well, that's something I can't have, because I feel like the support, it's not even created for me. It doesn't even have any of those criteria that I would need to have the support. And this is like, even if those that, let's say they had the most amazing parents to give them the support as much as possible, as much as they can, but the parents know that there's the nature and nurture aspect of it, right? And like exactly like you said, as a parent, you can mold them, but you don't know the kind of environment that they're getting exposed to, because you are fearful of what the things that you see in front of you that happening everywhere. You're more likely to get arrested. You're more likely to get in trouble. You're more likely to get picked on because of this, the color of your skin. It has nothing to do with who you are. It almost devalues their humanity, because they're saying, oh, it doesn't matter how much I do to achieve anything, everyone's going to judge me based on the color of my skin, or the way my name is mispronounced, or the way I speak, my accent, I can get made fun of. So I think that really highlights even I know we talked about this a little bit, even from an ethnic minority background, I know my community does not, we inform them of, our parents, there are these mental health services, and there's also lack of knowledge. So my parents would say, what is mental health? And so we had to explain that to them in our language. And so in your experience, even from your community, has that been so, where it's, there's a lack of awareness, not because, they don't want to, but because they didn't have the privilege to know what mental health is, let alone the services that it provides?
I'm chuckling because I remember when I was maybe 9 or 10, I had a conversation with my mom. And she asked, like most parents do, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said a psychologist. Initially, it was a pediatrician because there was a show on TV, Empty Nest. It was like a spin-off of The Golden Girls.
Yeah.
And there was a physician, a pediatrician on that. And I just loved the work that he did with kids. I knew I always wanted to be in the helping space. But then I went to my pediatrician and I got a shot. And that was it for me. I am never being a pediatrician because they're evil, they get shot.
Yeah.
I
We've all been there.
I switched to social services and I said I wanted to be a psychologist. But when I said that to my mom, she instantly responded, not responded, she reacted. Those are the people that get children to disrespect their parents, verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she perceived it to be, because I was born and raised in Jamaica. I left when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have conversations on mental health. You were
Yeah.
just bad, right? There's no ifs, ands about it. You were either bad or you were dumb. That
Yeah.
was it. We are such not a politically correct people.
So are we, trust me.
Those are our two diagnoses. You're bad or you're dumb. Everywhere I went, I saw it. And now looking at things through this trauma-informed lens, the lived experiences that our children are going through, what did we expect? They can't give a cerebral executive functioning response. It's going to be that primitive brain, because all their life, everything around them, whether it's in their home or it's in society, nature versus nurture, it has taught them, you are in a fight, do what you must to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that can look so many different ways when a child is trying to meet their needs. It can be fighting, physically fighting. It could be arguing and being disrespectful. It could be laughing and thinking everything is funny, which causes them to get additional consequences because the person's ego is triggered. Oh, you're thinking this is funny. I'll show you funny.
Yeah.
So all of those things are possible. And I don't think my parents had the opportunity to be aware of it because their parents didn't know it. And
Hmm.
their parents didn't know it. So they did the best with what they had. And
Hmm.
that was, you're just that. And you're trying to become the person to give children an excuse to be that.
Yeah.
But you said something earlier as well. It wasn't designed for us. This
Hmm.
space of mental health wasn't designed with us in mind. When people can say, well, Crystal, if individuals aren't volunteering, aren't seeking out services, then how will providers be able to create things to support mental health with equity?
Hmm.
My response to that always is Henrietta Lacks.
Hmm.
She is the pivotal key to everything OBGYN related right now because she, as an enslaved woman, was experimented on without any
Hmm.
form of anesthesia. And that is what created the foundation for all of these different processes that we have when we as women go in for our exam.
Yeah.
If you could have been so intentional to find this woman, you could be intentional to find any other person if your desire is to fix, is to restore, is to heal. And that's
Hmm.
not what it is. And as a result, we have cookie cutter approaches that don't take into account the nuances and the beauty that is birthed from different and original and unique and unknown.
Hmm.
Our differences shouldn't be othered. Our differences shouldn't be seen. We don't
Hmm.
fix this by assimilating into one thing. It is truly understanding the unique contributions that I'm able to bring because of my lived experiences, because of my background, because of my culture. That
Hmm.
is rich. And we have to show that. And until that happens, we'll see parent after parent, adult after adult, passing down generational trauma because there is no awareness that this is an option, hence it being a privilege. Health is a privilege.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's just so many things that you said that even hit home for me, just because, like I said, I'm from Ethiopia and they don't even know, like I said, what mental health is. So I remember even, like you said, it's so generational, right? And I think, you being there and, at me being here, like I always try to find these approaches to say sometimes because of knowing the culture that I'm oriented with to say that I have to be mindful of things that I say because it's not even like a lack of acknowledgement for mental health, but they say, but why do we need that? We don't have time for that. It's that time, right? And I
It's
think
the
that
time.
is
It's the time.
it's the time. And then I say, well, if you can take like 5 minutes for yourself instead of that, that approach of like the me time, and I remember when we're having this conversation with people of my community, we were laughing about it as that first generation Canadians, and we're like, imagine to explain this to our parents to say me time because they don't even know what that is. At least we understand it
This
a
is like
little
the story of when I had you and your brothers, I didn't have me time. What kind of
bit.
parent are you? The judgment surfaces, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I also find that even within the realm of the lack of understanding of mental health, especially for ethnic Black people of ethnic background, or they associate with a certain ethnic group or cultural group, I think them, especially like moving into, I think of the movie Coming to America, just because of the culture shock that they feel, because I'm used to seeing people that look like me, that spoke like me. So, and we didn't talk about services, so we didn't talk about health, that we didn't talk about, because there was that communal understanding or communal support. Even for when you're talking about the OBGYN, I know that my mom told me there's this, so traditionally when a woman gives birth for 40 days, no one leaves her sight. And the only time she gets to see, I remember when my brothers were born, we never saw her for 40 days, from the ones that I remember, because they take care of her. And so, and I asked her why that was, and she said, well, because there's a risk that, she may want to commit suicide or she is going through postpartum. So she explained it to me in a different wording than like, the direct translation to English, of course. But it's already ingrained there to help that person be well without even understanding it in the
without
way
making
that
a
we're
connection.
conceptualizing it. Exactly. Because I feel like mental health is a very Western concept, right? And I think before it used to be called, I think a long time ago, having a mental health illness was called, I think, alienism or something. Alienism, yeah. So we have come a long way to even understanding it, because why do we call it mental health? Because it's the health of the mind and the health of the brain. So her coming into that and then being here, immediately our parents go into survival mode, because now we're not in our comfort zone. We are in a different environment. So we're not even thinking about, like, if you're sick, you go to the hospital. If you need help with homework, we get help for you. But if there's something wrong with you in the head, and it's usually like, I feel like, especially people with religious backgrounds, they would say, let's pray for you. And I think prayer is like a very powerful tool. But so I often find it a struggle to describe or to conceptualize the term, translate it, first of all, from English to, like, the language that my parents speak or like my community speaks. So is that like that for you as well? That do you find that people often, there's, language is a big barrier, especially in describing mental health. So in your experience, is that often the case, that people are less likely to even go to these services because they fear that someone may not understand their language, or someone may not understand what it is that they're trying to explain to the healthcare professional?
So research shows that individuals, especially those from Black and Brown communities, would rather go to a physician or a helper that looks like them.
Mm-hmm.
There is an instant trust and bond that is established when I look at you and I can see myself.
Mm-hmm.
There are just some things that I won't be able to conceptualize or to articulate effectively if you are not a part of my community and you haven't had shared experience. You can pity me and feel sorry for me, but you won't truly understand. And then being able to use that information to then go and do something that is going to help bring about health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to go back as often as I can, going back home to Jamaica, because talent drain and brain drain exists in every
Mm-hmm.
city, right? So I'm intentional about going back and reinvesting in a community, in a culture, in a country that invested in me.
Mm-hmm.
When I go home, my delivery is completely different than it is.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
accent comes easy. Like I go back and I have to make sure that my information is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily jargon driven or DSM driven. It is very much, what is your day to day experience, and how is this day to day experience impacting your choices and your feelings and how you show up? And how can we make it where you are walking the path that you want to walk with the support that is accessible to you?
Mm-hmm.
If that isn't done, they can't do anything with it. And
Yeah.
that is what I tend to see happening with these transactional ways of providing services to communities, where individuals are serving communities that don't look like them.
Mm-hmm.
This worked over here, so I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to expect the same result. We
Mm-hmm.
can't cookie cutter health,
Mm-hmm.
especially mental health, because as you mentioned, we will show up if you have a car accident. If you're
Mm-hmm.
delivering a baby, we will create a meal train and someone will take time to bring your food and to come and do your laundry and do all of that. But let you suffer from something like a mental health episode where postpartum lasts longer than people are comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Should you be over that already? You have this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful baby. You have a husband that's taking care of you. Why are you still sad? You're just seeking attention. You're just lazy and you don't want to do anything better. All of a sudden, all of the supports go away. So
Mm-hmm.
as a service provider coming in harbors some of those same biases because they truly don't understand that intergenerational trauma gets triggered with new trauma, which
Mm-hmm.
causes a more exacerbated result or outcome. If they don't have that in their toolbox, how can they adequately support?
Mm-hmm.
So the language barrier, not just in terms of speaking different languages, but the ability to understand and then implement information. That has always been a barrier and continues to be a barrier because there's a lack of understanding of the need for equity. Again, it's outcomes driven. It is
Yeah.
not action driven or intervention driven. It's
Hmm.
the same interventions and get completely different results unless you put the equity lens
Hmm. I mean, that's a very, very well articulated response, and I think you talked about. I think it's that resilience within like ethnic minorities, let alone just Black people. I guess it's that we're outcome driven, and I think it's because we see a problem, we fix it, but we don't think of the journey to get there. We're more, we already see the problem even coming in, so we say, okay, we need to prevent this before it even gets any further. So where in mental health is so intricate because it's that gray area. It's not like I cut my hand and I see the wound and I like put band-aid on it, put some polysporin and say it's going to heal itself, and I see the progress as it goes. Mental health takes time, and there's so many barriers within ethnic minorities that exist, and language is just like one small but big thing. And there's also different, like you said, it's we need to put that equity in there to say, how can we fix it? And that one model approach that you talked about, how can I bring this back home and would this model work? And often it doesn't, because, and I think this has to do with the westernized concept saying, let's be the war, because I do the same thing, and sometimes I forget that I do it and I say, well, it's not going to work, so why isn't it not working? And so the one model fits all, especially in terms of the policies that we see, that checkbox, I think it's like you can copy paste it everywhere and it's there, and they say we did our due diligence, so we're done. So even from experiences, even if people are willing to speak about their mental health struggles, especially Black people in the corporate world, for example, they're often scared because they're going to say, now they're going to see me differently. Now they're going to say, oh, this person, what could possibly be the problem that they would be having? So they're less likely, and even the most educated Black person, of ethnic minority, that can say, even I, as a person that I also moved here when I was 13. So, and I'm so much more aware about the mental health services here. I worked in, and I still do casually in mental health services as well. And I do see those barriers, and I do see people less likely to even go because they fear, is this going to implicate my work? Is this going to implicate my livelihood? What if people find out, like, what am I? So that fear is, it could come from intergenerational, but even the most educated person is still less likely to go. And it's really unfortunate. And you're saying, as a one caring adult, you could do your part to, in your community or within your organization to say that it's okay. At least you can talk to someone, or, I feel like we need to create more spaces as those that we're more aware of our cultural background, and we're trying to bring that, but in a way it's also challenging for us, I'm sure. But in your opinion, what do you think one can do from one caring adult to another to say that these accesses are there, and so we're like, how do you mitigate that fear for the person, I guess, to go and have access to these mental health services?
So I'm going to not look at it from an episodic standpoint of
Mhm.
individuals having these experiences and how to help them search. It has to be more on that systemic issue or that
Mhm.
systemic standpoint. So, um, like I'll use this to explain it. When I see organizations doing self-care training where they're telling staff do yoga and practice mindfulness and guided meditation and journaling, spoiler alert, all of it works. um, but if that is all you're telling them, but you're not changing the environment that caused them to be burnt out in the first place, you're asking how did I describe it the other day? You're telling the woman that's being abused by her husband to slap makeup on her face to cover it.
Oh, yeah.
We're using these band-aid approaches to fix these wounds that are
Mhm.
really, really, really causing chronic illness and death.
Mhm.
So if we want to see more people going after support, we have to cultivate a culture that is pro support.
Mhm.
So it's making your environment safe for an individual to express dissent, Dissent doesn't mean that we are against you. Dissent means that I am holding you accountable because I support you that much.
Yeah.
Accountability is me saying, that is my love language to you, saying, I care so much about your success, I'm willing to hold a mirror up in front of your face so that you're able to see this is what you're doing. Your core value that you declare says X, but you're actually walking out Y and Z. So how do we bridge this gap? Because dissonance exists and we need to remedy that. And
Yeah.
if we can start cultivating, emotional intelligence is the highest predictor of successful outcomes. If we can create emotionally intelligent leaders, we get
Mhm.
emotionally intelligent policies and procedures. We get healthy climates that automatically, without having to create an initiative, promote health and wellness. It's not that we don't want to seek after it. How do we get to seek after it?
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I do, but I was talking to a girlfriend of mine the other night and I made the admission that I don't read to my kids as much as I need to. Because when I'm not working, what do I want to do? I don't want to do anything. I want to take a break and rest. I want
Yeah.
to disconnect from all responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I feel this way and the toxic stress that I face is minimal, how do we expect the person that is a single parent or living in a two-parent household, but they're either unemployed or underemployed, and they're dealing and navigating with everything that they have to face? How do we expect them to do it?
Mhm.
They won't. And it's unfair for me to go to them and say, you should do one more thing,
Yeah.
because that is the only way it will be perceived. You see me struggling and you're asking me to do something more. You're asking me to pay for a service. I can't afford to pay for the services I need, but
Yeah.
you're asking me to pay for another service. And God forbid they sign up for health care. You're entitled. You're bleeding the system dry. So you're telling me to get help, but you don't want to create a pathway and access for me to get.
Mhm.
We have to make up our minds.
Yeah.
So the solution isn't in the episodical intervention. It is
Mhm.
truly in creating the changes needed to the system in order to naturally have this as a byproduct.
Mhm.
Health
Mhm.
is a byproduct of justice, not
Yeah.
the other way
Absolutely.
around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is a true testament to, like about mental health in general. Exactly what you said. It is often the system. If the system fails you, of course you are going to say, if I can't afford this, then how am I going to afford that if it's not created for me? And that slap the makeup in the face, that's a really, like, really, it's going to stick with me for a while. I think you're absolutely right in the sense that, and we can relate to it as well, even people that are aware, like we're aware of the accesses that we can have, as people who are from, two different parts of the world. We say, wow, this access doesn't exist there, but we have it here. But it's not even set up so properly that people can actually go there and feel heard, or feel that, this is the access, that this is the service that I need, therefore I'm going to get it. Because often it could be of poor quality, because it's known that Black people are going to get poor services, poor mental health, poor health services in general, let alone mental health services, which is another thing, let alone, more, of course they're going to get less likely than their white counterparts. And I think that knowledge in and of itself is, it's kind of heartbreaking. And you're right, it shouldn't be seen just as an episodic view. And it's often the system, right? It's either the check mark, we're done. And like you said, I chuckled when you said, oh yeah, do yoga classes, let's meditate together. And I see that in the corporate world, and I often chuckle too. And I would go to my girlfriends on the side of the chat and say, are they kidding me? You think people like us are gonna have time for this?
All of
Yoga's
this gets fixed with a 10-second affirmation and guided meditation. Yep.
Absolutely. For me, if I can wake up and make an effort to look human and go to work and survive that work, go home and put my feet up, and if I have 2 minutes of my day, that's I'm thankful for. And I think I also, and like as an individuals, I think individuals, I guess, we talked about parents and not having even time for themselves to mentally compartmentalize. Like you said, you want your me time, because if you're not going to have a great mental space, how are you going to take care of someone else within that mental space? And you don't want to transfer that. And as a parent, you're very wary of that. So, and my parents say that to me all the time. We always see them with happy faces, even though they may be struggling, or they may be, we don't know what's going through their head. So I think for me, we always try to tell our parents to say, okay, what is it that you're happy with that you would like to do that you never had a chance to do? And because as an individual, I say I can help the parents, or I can help communities, maybe because communities mirror other communities, and they say, oh, are they going to this like cottage or something? Or are they going to this restaurant? Oh, we can go too. So kind of there's that mimicry within my community, at least. So we ask them what it is that they want, that they would never had the chance to say. And it's hilarious because often they'd be like, I would just want to go to a restaurant and like have a nice meal. And it's like, for us, it's like, we could have that any other day. But for them, they never, it's a luxury to them to, or even if they say a spa day, it's like, for them, it's a bigger deal than it is for us. Because for me, I say I can go anytime I want, but I'm not going to, because, for XYZ reasons. But for them, they never had the chance because their entire lives, they've been in such a failed system that they are there to just survive themselves so they can survive their kids. But had these support like services been there that were catered to ethnic minorities, and I think that's the failure of like having the system that's created for mental health services. I often find that it's created for white people, because you see it and then you go, how am I going to have time to do any of this when I'm barely surviving to live my life? Or you could have 2 or 3 jobs, and you can have kids and you can have a job. So you're absolutely right. It starts from the system. And I think we also make that push and that strive as well as individuals. But it's, for me, I find it disheartening sometimes because it often comes from, Black people or ethnic minorities to say, well, we need to make this change. And we're seen as, what more could you want? The service is already created for you. It's for everybody. So, it's an important conversation to have, but it's also exhaustive because you're saying, I'm surviving as I am as a Black person. And on top of that, if I try to make the slightest bit of change or the slightest bit of suggestion to make a change, I'm seen as this other ungrateful employee that is, the space is there, why are they not using it? So what do you think we could do as individuals? First of all, we need to protect our mental health even when we say it, because we have to, Lord knows, like the courage and the energy you need, or the right words to have that conversation with your bosses. And I often do that to say, okay, how am I going to frame this, as angry as I am, to see that there's a lot more that needs to be done, so that it doesn't seem that I'm not grateful. I am grateful. However, more needs to be done within the system, because then we're not going to see the change at all. People are still not going to have access to these services, especially Black communities. So what do you think we could do as individuals to be the forcer of that change within the corporate system?
First, I think it starts with that self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tame something you haven't named. You can't heal something you haven't felt. So sitting in that feeling of angst, disappointment, anger, fear, anxiety, whatever it is, but just allowing those feelings to rise to the surface so that you can know what you're advocating for, you can know what needs to be fixed. I think because we stay in a space of survival so much, we're always looking for a fight. And because of that, we're never strategic in our effort. So we first have to have that internal reflection and that assessment of what is it that I'm feeling and what is causing it? What's the problem? What's the impact? What's the barrier to solve? And then doing that with the people around us. And in terms of communicating that with your teams, I always encourage people, talk to people about their core values. So when I initially started One Caring Adult, I did a lot of work on implicit biases and racism and going into companies and doing that work. And I live in a community that we are not ready to have these conversations, but we have to be ready because there's no other time but now.
Yeah.
But I realized there was such resistance. And to be honest with it, no matter how you phrase it, you will always experience resistance or ambivalence, right? So I'm cognizant of that.
Yeah.
But I realized when I met people where they were, But more importantly, I tied it back to their core values. I started seeing more people being willing to engage in the conversation. And
Mhm.
because now we're able to actually have a conversation, it wasn't where I'm talking at you or you're just completely ignoring me and walking out of the room.
Mhm.
We were able to grow awareness that impacted hearts that now are beginning to impact policy.
Yeah.
So fostering those opportunities within your teams, within like-minded individuals to support each other, and
Mhm.
as you're growing and supporting each other, then connecting it with your leaders' core values.
Mhm.
So what was the mission and vision of the organization, and why was that selected? And
Mhm.
how do you feel we're doing with the mission and vision? Because what we tend to see, like I'm sharing some information with a group at three today, and the report shows that executive leaders in organizations, 71% think that their culture is great, but when you talk to the director of HR, only 21%.
Mhm.
90% of reality is perception. And because you can only look through the lens of your lived experience, if your lived experiences don't match the people on your team, you will automatically perceive everything is going well while people are waiting the waters down.
Mhm.
So it's allowing relationships to develop so that those conversations about core values can happen.
Mhm.
And then, by all means, don't feel you have to do the work. We have to start holding people accountable for if this is truly what you say, if this is truly what you mean, invest in bringing in someone to help us walk through this journey.
Mhm.
There's tons of people that offer consulting services that can help do this work. This is
Mhm.
not the responsibility of the Black people on your team to do yet
Mhm.
another task to fix their oppression. So calling on them to invest in this professional development because the return of investment is huge.
Mhm.
The cost of their inaction is even bigger.
Mhm.
We can choose to be proactive with this insurance policy, or we can choose to be reactive with the liability that you open yourself for, because we will pay one way or the other.
Yeah.
So make the pay the one that is the least harmful, and the more beneficial, not just to your bottom line, because engagement increases, productivity increases, your products
Mhm.
increase, profits increase. But
Yeah.
if human capital is truly the most important resource, it's time for us to begin investing in our human capital. So we have
Mhm.
to grow curious. We have to be willing to listen. And adopting a listening stance isn't listening to respond, it's listening to be able to ask clarifying questions to ensure that you understand so that you can co create solutions together.
Yeah.
That only happens if we invite diverse voices to the room. You
Mhm.
made the statement earlier that the norms are white. They're white for a reason, and that is not something that people need to get upset or uncomfortable about.
Mhm.
But who created the norms?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
created the policy? And we can always have one or two individuals of color in a room, but are they able to speak and are their voices implemented on? But if you constantly have this monolith mindset, creating rules and regulations and policies for everyone to follow, and that population is diverse, then you're going to always look for assimilation
Yeah.
instead of truly, truly valuing the beauty of diversity so that you can create equity, so that
Mhm.
everyone has a place, their needs are met in the way it needs to be met, because it
Yeah.
takes their experiences into account.
Absolutely. I mean, Crystal, that's a brilliant way of even creating that intersectional thought between systemic change and individual change, because they have to meet halfway through. Because core values, I think you hit it in the head there, because you have to find the common denominator instead of saying, why do I have to be the one to create this? I'm the one that needs the services. But instead, to kind of approach it in a way, what is it that we have in common that we could at least meet halfway? We can have the conversation, because I think everything starts with a conversation. It's that one small but big change, because if we're having the conversation, then we're willing to make the change. And we have to deviate away from, as individuals as well, to say that I'm tired of fighting, and I'm tired of, not that there, of course you have the right to, because it could be exhausting to say that,
Just a bit.
it is, really dire. And there are days where you're like, I just want to shut everything out. But I think if you want to see the change, especially if we talked about intergenerational trauma, and if we're trying to make the change, I think it starts from us as well as individuals. But we have to work with the system, because the system is not, it's there, it's that entity that will exist, but we have to change the policies within. But that means we have to find the common values within the people that created the system to say, well, this fit our approach. How could we bridge you into your approach as well? And I think find that core value. That's a really, really beautiful takeaway message. And thank you so much for, bringing to a variety of different angles of looking at even race, ethnicity, and even from an institutional perspective, an individual perspective, cultural perspective. Thank you for bridging in so many of these disparities that are often seen as this like monolith approach, or that like singular approach. So we're very, very appreciative. Thank you so much, Crystal. If someone wants to find you, I guess I'll put the link of the beautiful organization, One Caring Adult, when this goes live on Saturday. So it truly is an honor to have you, and a privilege as well. So thank you so much for coming out here today, discussing mental health matters with us.
No, thank you again for inviting me. I so appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you as well.
Okay, bye.